Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the mist clings to the trees and the silence hides more than it reveals, people whisper of things not meant to be seen or spoken of. Hey guys, tonight I'll be reading true stories that took place in the Appalachian Mountains, pulled from the darkest corners of Reddit. Tales of strange voices in the woods, sightings not understandable, and footsteps where no one should be. So light a candle, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't look out the window. This is Dark Luna. I live in the heart of Appalachia, and this is easily the most terrifying story of one of my experiences. This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it is honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2-3 years ago. I live in the southern West Virginia, and have for most of my life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with my friend. I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening, doing the usual thing, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it was very dense in the woods that surrounded it, and it was easy to get freaked out when thinking about your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk, when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking, humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain. Almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speaker and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately set us off. We bolt directly down to the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we run down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quitting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, grasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is this bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nest and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I encountered something inhuman in those woods. Edit. I know I will receive questions, such as what the voice was probably saying, or to explain the area and what happens after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly cannot recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All I can recall is that it was a fluctuating voice in pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting.
Oh wow, I feel this to my bones. My uncle, mother's brother, has had a farm in southeast West Virginia since the 70s, long before I came into the world. Mom is the oldest of 5, and my uncle built a bunch of houses on the farm so family could use it whenever. Some lived there, and others, like my family, visited often. My mom and older sister and I would go for weeks to end to spend time with family, and I always loved it because I have a ton of cousins and was the baby for a long time. So mostly I tagged along with my cousins and felt extremely safe, like it was my happy place. I don't really remember anything totally out of the ordinary when I was really little, other than I remember an imaginary friend whom I exclusively played with at the farm, nowhere else. And we moved extensively for my dad's job, so I lived in many different places. What I remember after age 5 was suddenly being old enough not to have someone walk me to and from other houses, which I thought was so cool. So I used to explore. My uncles liked to bow hunt and had taken me a few times, not too far into the woods, so I was able to go back on my own and find their little tree platform they had built to hunt from. I thought they were cool little tree houses. Your story sounds a lot like the very last time I ever took off by myself in the woods without another family member with me. It was the winter. I wanted to be out in the snow and explore. So I found my way up the mountains. That is what I called it, but in fact it was probably just a massive hill. And into the trees. I couldn't find the spot I was looking for and got pretty frustrated with my 8-year-old self. So I sat down by the creek to catch my breath and figure out where I was. I couldn't have been sitting more than about 3 minutes when something let out a scream. I can only describe as blood-curdling. I thought it was a fox, most likely, until I heard another voice crying, just weeping and wailing, and the sorrow was palpable. My cousins had always told scary stories about Appalachia, and I figured that they had followed me into the woods and were trying to scare the pants off of me for shoots and giggles. I called out like, "Okay guys, not funny. Okay, I'm going home. Enough!" and followed my footprints in the snow as fast as I could back to the farm. The screaming and crying did not stop, stayed consistent as I moved, which really made me convinced it had to be my cousins. I don't think I heard words like crying and screaming, but it wasn't pleasant. Made my way back to the main house, my uncle's house, which was the biggest on the property and visible from the edge of the woods, and absolutely booked it. Ran full tilt to get to the kitchen door. I remember getting through the door and slamming it behind me because I was a combo of terrified and annoyed that my cousins were playing a prank on me. The next closest cousin in age is 9 years older than me, and so I was often the butt of pranks. Well, wouldn't you know, every family member was accounted for in the living room/kitchen. The older male cousin and my uncle were in the kitchen, putting their snow boots and coats on to come look for me. I had apparently been gone for several hours, and they were worried. According to my mom, I was white-faced. My hands were covered in scratches through the mittens. I guess I must have fallen or something. They were so worried I had disappeared. I should add, I set off from my aunt's to walk to my uncle's and had decided to take a detour and didn't tell anyone. Oops, I was 8 and really didn't think about how that might be bad. My mom said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I asked if anyone had come out to the woods to look for me, and they said no, We've been looking at the different houses and we're just about to come look for you because they saw my footprints head into the woods. I told them about where I went and what I heard, and my uncle, whose property it was, said, oh shit. I think you probably ran into the witch. I'm over here thinking, oh, some crazy lady lives in the woods and I probably stumbled near her cottage. Nope. The witch was just what they called the unknown entity that roamed in the woods, screaming, crying, mimicking people's voices, and just giving people a good old sense of doom and dread. No one had a straight answer about possible folklore or anything like that, but all the older cousins had their own experiences with similar happenings over the years. Scared the living daylights out of me, and while I've been back to the farm over the years, I can tell you I have never once set foot near the wood tree line, even as an adult. I was grateful my family didn't think I was crazy, but they said a general rule is not to be in the woods alone, so I listened. To my knowledge, nothing physical ever happened with anyone in this entity. More of a prankster than anything. But oof, the Appalachia has some wild stuff. I definitely remember some strange stuff happening during the week we had my aunt's funeral when I was 21. And random voices, or red eyes, or smoke apparitions in the wood edge. But I never went to check them out after that one incident. Edit. I should add that 100% of the family that was at the farm that trip was accounted for at my uncle's house, getting ready to come look for me. So, if it was anything other than something supernatural, it was not from anyone staying at the farm. Okay, so I've been looking for people that have had a similar experience to mine. I completely believe you, because when I was a kid, I had an experience in the Appalachian Mountains. I was around 10 years old, and my parents would take us to the Meacham Lake campgrounds to camp for the whole summer. The first night we were there, we had set up camp, ate some food, and my parents had quite a lot of drinks with their friends, so needless to say, by the time they came in the tent to sleep, they were passed out. We were sharing this one big tent, me, my parents, and my uncle. While I was laying there trying to fall asleep, I suddenly got an absolutely horrifying feeling. It came completely out of nowhere, and I felt freezing cold and completely panicked. Very shortly after this feeling came on, I started hearing the sound of breaking sticks and panting slowly approaching the tent. At this point, I'm so scared that I'm paralyzed and I can't even speak. I didn't even want to make any noise to wake up my parents because I was terrified that that thing would try and come into the tent. This thing began to walk around our tent. It was walking upright like a human, with its body pushed against the tent, as it was circling around it, almost like it wanted me to see it and be aware of it. I was so scared for the first few hours that it was circling around the tent that it hadn't even registered in my mind that my uncle's window was unzipped, so I could see through it when it walked by and actually get a look at it. I ended up looking at it as it passed by my uncle's window, and what I saw was not normal. This thing looked like a pale, emaciated, humanoid monster. It didn't have hair on its head, and its eyes were black. This damn thing circled around the tent all night long until the sun came up, and it just left. I told my parents and uncle about it that morning, freaking out and shaking. They didn't take me seriously. Probably thought I just had a bad dream. But I know what a bad dream is, and I was up all night. Didn't sleep a wink, just shivering in terror over this thing all night. I was even so exhausted, I slept all day, so I highly doubt it was a bad dream. Because clearly, I hadn't slept if I was tired enough to sleep the entire day away the next morning. Something happened over 40 years ago, and it still freaks me out. I was visiting a friend that lived deep in the Appalachians near Hot Spring, Virginia. We were coming home fairly late after an evening of fun. We turned on one of the winding country roads and came to a fork in the road. When I made a turn, the headlights lit up a black blob crouching behind a bush. It stood up, and we realized that it was over 7 feet tall. As it stood, we saw a white face, but it wasn't a face. I can only describe it as something in a big black shroud with what looked like a sun-bleached, huge cow skull. I think about 5 minutes passed before I asked my friend if she saw something. I asked her to describe what she saw, and it was exactly what I saw. The next morning, we told her parents what we saw, expecting them to burst out laughing and tell us we drank too much. I've never seen faces drain of color so quickly. The dad said he had heard some people seeing this thing on their farm, only to come outside the following day to find slaughtered sheep. He also knew of someone that almost hit it when it darted out in front of them. Her dad then asked if we heard any sounds during the encounter. That's when my friend and I remembered a very low, very loud growl-like sound. We were so freaked out by what we saw that the sound wasn't processed by our brains until the next morning. I've had some freaky shit happen to me during my 6 decades on this earth. This one still sends shivers down my spine. I live in the Appalachian Mountains, and this reminded me of 2 experiences. Neither were as scary as yours, but I'll share them. 1. I was riding home late at night with my mom. About halfway up the long driveway to our house, we saw glowing green lights. It was too dark to make out much, but we could tell this thing was too tall to be an animal. The eyes looked towards the car, and then whatever it was took off so fast through the empty field that we hadn't even had time to register what we'd seen. It disappeared within seconds, and we both looked at each other, and the first words from either of us were, "Did you see that?" We made my dad come out to the car to walk us inside. 2. I went camping with my husband, his brother, and his brother's girlfriend at about 2 a.m. I heard someone walk really close to our tent. As weird as it sounds, I could sense it staring at the tent, and I knew it was on 2 legs. I could feel it standing behind the tent for a good while before it walked off. I assumed my brother-in-law needed to pee, and I made a mental note to joke with him about peeing so close to our tent. I brought it up the next morning, and no one had left their tent after we went to sleep around 11 p.m. Forgot to mention, we were camping way up in the woods behind a family member's house. There would be no reason for any other person to be in the woods there, especially not that time of night. I believe you. My stepdad is from Marmot, West Virginia. He grew up just outside of town, near Lenz Creek, literally on the other side of a mountain. When I was a kid, he would tell me stories about the road that he would walk to get to my uncle's house on the other side of the mountain. He claimed there was a stretch of the road that if you were walking alone at night, you could hear footsteps off on the side in the brush walking along with you. Not only that, but if you ran, it would run with you. I never really believed him. When I was a junior in high school, we went on a family trip up to West Virginia, as we often did. And this time, I brought my girlfriend. One night, My stepdad asked us if we wanted to go drive up to the old house and walk the road to see if we hear the footsteps. We were skeptical, but curious, so we decided to go check it out. Long story short, we heard the fucking footsteps, but not in the brush next to us. Instead, it sounded and felt distinctly like someone running up on us from behind. I took off running and left my girlfriend in the dust without thinking twice, lol. True shit. And alrighty guys, that was it for today's spooky Appalachian Mountain stories. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and hit that like and or subscribe button. Thanks for listening. Until next spooky story time. Bye.